Okay, so in Grandma's family, how many kids were there? Mum, Margaret, and Robert that went up into the Highlands.
Yeah. Um, John and George were in the armed forces.
Mm.
They were older than the others. They were in the armed forces. I think I don't know what divisions were in, but the family was split up very, very early. My mother was me, Hannah, and Robert and Auntie Margaret. Now they were sent up to the Highlands from an orphanage in England, in this
In Glasgow.
in the Glasgow area, because they'd lived in the Glasgow area. That's where they came from when they were kids. But the mother died, and the father was he was in the forces, and he couldn't look after them anyway.
He was a singer, is that right?
He had a good singing voice. And
Can you remember their names, the mother and the father? Something Hannah, Mum.
Hannah. I think the mother was Mary Hannah. The father was, I'm sure, was George Hannah.
Okay.
But we never ever saw them. They were long dead before we came on the scene.
Yeah. So Grandma and Auntie Margaret and Robert went up to the Highlands.
They were put in. First of all, they were orphaned into a woman, an old woman who looked after them, and but the old woman really couldn't look after them, and they were just little kids.
Yeah.
You know, they were all under 10.
Yeah.
And they were taken away from they were taken away from them by the authorities because she just couldn't look after them. She couldn't give them proper food.
And they went up to the Highlands. So Mary
and they were put into a big home, an orphanage home.
Yeah.
From taken off the old woman after a few months, and my mother said it was just one of these things. They were only there about a month or two, and there Margaret and Mum and Robert were shoofed away in the train to Mora, which is next door to Mallaig. And Brackra is that little village 3 miles up the side of Loch Mora, just a few crofts.
Yeah.
And this old woman called Miss Walker, a lovely old woman, big strong lass who was looking after the place all on her own, needed kids to give her a hand, and she'd give them a roof over their head and feed them. And there's a little village school. It was just a very small school because it'd only be about maybe up to about 10 crofts round the water's edge, and the kids would be going to that school.
So their older sister was, at that stage, would have been Mary Hannah, Mary, who became Mary Topless. She would have, so Mary
she
Topless.
married Tom Topless.
So she didn't go to the Highlands.
No, she was older, you see, and she went in, she got, when
you say older, she'd be about 14, 15.
She was old enough to have left school, and she went straight to a job in England, looking at, in a hotel, working in the hotel.
Yeah.
As a maid in a hotel.
Yeah.
And and she married a miner called Tom Topless, who was a lovely old guy, big tall lad, and they became very, very friendly with us.
And was
even though they lived in Derbyshire in England.
Ilkeston, was it?
In Ilkeston, yeah. And they had a big family. Auntie Mary and Uncle Tom. They had George, John, Mary, Donald, Enoch, Robert, and maybe one other. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
One older one I never actually met.
I think you said they were quite good boxers. Is that right?
They're very good boxers. George and John were, both. they did a lot of boxing in the forces. Everybody had to do a bit of national service in these days. Excuse me, I put my head down. It goes.
So Grandma's brothers, George and John.
But Donald was the best of the boxers. He actually did a lot of the top class amateur boxing in England.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, he didn't go for English titles or anything like that, but he was in area titles and he was an area champion for his area, this sort of thing, when he was just a young teenager growing up. But the other boys, of course, you had the benefit of boxing with George and John, who were big, strong lads, big, fine. Both good boxers. I never knew them very well because they both died comparatively young.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, and Donald and Mary became the two oldest as I was growing up. I grew up with them as my very good friends. Only cousins I really had. Because although my father had 7 boys in their family, John Archie never had any children. John Archie and his wife Mary never had any children. They lived in Mali. He was on the railway there all his life. A nice guy. I've got photos of him. There's 4 of them above your head there.
Yeah.
No, but Andy went to
Canada
and joined the Calgary Highlanders during the war. But we had a photo of him working on a ranch in Canada on a horse and things like that on a wall in Mali. He was a little guy. Dad says he was the best footballer in the family. He was small, sharp, tough, and full of fire and brimstone, but nice guy.
Now, on Grandma's side, her 2 brothers, the older brothers, not Robert, but George and John. So you said the older brothers. What happened to them? Did they not have any kids? So there were 2 brothers that were older than Mary Topless.
Yeah. George and John, now they died comparatively young because we never ever met them. And the war was on. And one of them, I think, was killed at sea on a ship during the war. I can't remember the name of the ship. I was only a kid at the time. Mum never talked about it much, as we got older. But George was in the army overseas. He was the older one. George and John were the 2 oldest ones, and George was in the army, British Army, in the Middle East in Constantinople, and he contracted some illness there and he died.
That's right.
So they were out of the picture comparatively young because John was on a boat that was sunk. And I was in the Navy and he was on a boat that was sunk. I don't think he was on the Navy. I think he was on cargo ships. He was on a boat that was travelling between Belfast and Liverpool and sunk, and he was one of the people who died. But I'm never quite sure about that in my mind because my father had a brother called Johnny, and Mum had a brother called John. So I don't know which one it was.
Yeah, because there's also your dad had a brother called Duncan who died at sea as well.
Yeah, Duncan.
He died on the fishing boats. Is that right?
No, I think Duncan died. I think Duncan died on a merchant ship.
Okay, I thought I thought he went out and down in the Irish Sea as well.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I just remember my father telling me one of Duncan's friends, Duncan was only about 18 or 19 at the time, and he got onto this merchant navy ship, you see, and he was on this ship and it was travelling between Belfast and Liverpool, and it hit a massive storm, and the ship went down, and Duncan was drowned, and most of them were drowned, and because he was on watch. That's what my father told me. He was on watch that night, and he was the last man off.
Right, yeah.
And so the boats weren't getting the dinghies away because it was massive waves, and the cargo ship was going down quickly. The cargo had shifted or something. But this guy came up to the house in Malig later on, and he was a mate of Duncan's, and he'd been on the ship, and he'd been saved. And he told them, and I can remember this quite clearly because it was quite dramatic, and he told them that Duncan had been the last person on watch to get off the ship.
Right.
There was no room in the dinghy, it was overflowing as it was, and it had gone away, but he was in the last person practically coming off the ship, and they had to dive into the water and try and get something. And he said that the one or two little boats that were small, they were packed to the gills, and they couldn't get near anybody because they couldn't maneuver them. They just had an oar, and they were getting tossed all over the bloody sea. And the storm was big enough to sink the big ship, the merchant ship, and it went down. A lot of lives were lost. And they said Dad said this guy came up to the house all the way from the south of England to talk to his mum and dad and tell her about Duncan's last hours on the ship. He was an English lad, and he said, I was on this boat and I could see him out there. He says he was a great swimmer. He was a big, strong guy. He was a good swimmer, but he says you couldn't get a boat near any of them. The boats were just getting thrown all. There was only about a couple of boats survived, but we managed to get in the water before the thing went down. And there was people hanging on the sides and falling off and things like that. He says them. And we just, after a while, we lost sight of Duncan. He was just out there for a long time. He says, and I says, I thought I had to come and let you know that. Come all the way. He took a few days off to come all the way up from England. It cost take him a day and a half to get from where he was down the south. So that stuck with Dad all his life, and he used to tell us that, because we used to ask him, how did these guys die? All your brothers die, you know.